What's your relationship with Marcus Aurelius's Meditations?
Well, he's quoted a number of times in the movie. I wrote down every time there's a beautiful scene where a father and daughter, sort of the Cicero scene, and she says at first,
"It is the responsibility of leadership to work intelligently with what is given, and not waste time fantasizing about a world of flawless people and perfect choices." Marcus Aurelius.
Hear, hear. Excellent.
And that's sort of appropriate for the Catiline character, who's a futurist.
Yeah.
And then she looks to her father and she says, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding yourself in the ranks of the insane," which is very appropriate for today.
Yes.
And then she kisses him and she says, finally, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it," which is Marcus Aurelius, the great Marcus Aurelius. What a great emperor Rome had.
Yes. The only philosopher king.
And what a terrible son he had.
Yes. Yeah, you could argue that Joaquin Phoenix's Commodus is maybe too generous. Like he was actually worse.
He was worse. He was worse than Caligula.
Yeah. How does that?
If anyone could be worse than Caligula or Nero.
Yes. I'm fascinated with that. How does such a great man raise such a terrible son?
Well, it comes down to how many wives did he have? Who was Commodus's mother?
Faustina. Marcus only had one wife, and they were pretty. We're told he loves her deeply. There's some rumors that she's unfaithful, but we're told he loves her deeply. The problem, I think, is Marcus Aurelius buries 6 of his 11 children, which I don't know how a family could possibly withstand that kind of tragedy.
You know, in the old days, I mean, a generation before us, people usually had 6, 7, 8 kids, and they lost 2.
Yeah.
And I lost 1 son, and I tell you, it's a sentence of 30 years before the first thing you think in the morning, did it happen? Did it really happen? And it's only after 30 years that it wasn't the first horrible thought I had in the morning.
Wow.
It made me think of that great Aeschylus quote. There's an Aeschylus quote about how the pain drips on you drop by drop until by the awful grace of God, you know, it took me 30 years for the horror of realizing I lost my son to not be the first thing I thought of in the morning.
I've sort of thought that when people say Marcus Aurelius's writing is depressing, I think that this guy got out of bed at all in the morning after the tragedy and death and pain that he felt. Actually, he must have been the most hopeful, optimistic person who ever lived.
I don't find, I found that there's a Marcus Aurelius quote. I'm sure you know it. I don't want to get to look at it, but I lost this wife of 60 years, and
I'm so sorry.
It's sort of devastating. But there was a Marcus Aurelius quote that really lifted me, which was if you lose, I don't know it literally, but you'll know it. If you lose a loved one, honor her, and in a sense try to be more like her, and then she'll live in your actions. And so my wife was very good, and I just try to be like her. And when I try to be like her, I like she was very, if someone was alone or sick or something, she'd call them up and be comforting to them. And I'm not like that, you know. So I started to do that. People that I know, some guys my age who have no grandchildren, are just there, and call them up and say, "How are you?" and being like her.
Yeah.
And they were so pleased and said, "Oh, it's so kind." And so I keep my wife in my life with Marcus Aurelius' advice by trying to be more like her.
I find that absolutely beautiful. Oh man, that's
Yeah, it is.
that that Aeschylus quote you just mentioned. I was just writing about this last week because did you know that the night that RFK found out that Martin Luther King had been assassinated, he was giving a speech in Indianapolis in a black neighborhood, and he could feel a riot coming on. And he quoted that speech to them, and he spoke about his own loss of his brother. And that was one of the few cities in America that didn't riot. And so again, these ideas from the classics coming right back to modern life and being of use. It's such an incredibly wonderful and important tradition, I think.
Well, someone sent me that quote when I lost my son, and it was the only quote that I understood emotionally. That ultimately it drops on you, drop by drop, until by the awful grace of God comes wisdom or something, whatever came.
Yeah, I think before that, Sophocles or Aeschylus says, we suffer unto truth. That's the only way that we learn the important things about life and about existence.
We suffer into truth. How beautiful.